Okay, everyone, welcome to the Council of Graduate Schools webinar, Results from the Fall 2019 CGS International Graduate Admissions Survey. It will feature presentations by Enu Zhou, a Senior Analyst here at the Council of Graduate Schools, Ray Mitich, the postdoctoral researcher here at CGS, Kim Lascola-Needy, the Dean of the Graduate School and International Education, as well as the Professor of Industrial Engineering at the University of Arkansas, as well as Hirnao Okahana, Vice President, Research and Knowledge Development here at CGS. So our plan for today is that we're going to have 3 speakers who will speak for approximately 40 minutes total, followed by a question and answer session. The first presenters will be Dr. Zhou and Ray Mitich, both of the Council of Graduate Schools, and they will share highlights from the recently released CGS report, International Graduate Applications and Enrollment, Fall 2019, for about 25 minutes. They'll be followed by Dr. Kim Lascola-Needy of the University of Arkansas, who will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes, highlighting campus efforts as well as strategies to increase international graduate enrollment, and will also offer tips and suggestions for other institutions. So before we get going here, we like to go through just a couple of technical slides. So a reminder that the webinar recording, as well as the slides, will be emailed to all registrants, as well as posted on the CGS website, usually within about 1 week. You can submit questions during the webinar at any time through the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side. If we're having any sorts of technical issues, troubleshooting help is available at the URL below. So the most common issue that we have is problems with audio. So to troubleshoot the audio, if you're having trouble hearing us, you can try switching to a different audio connection. You can change from telephone to mic and speakers or vice versa without leaving the session. If you're experiencing persistent trouble with a telephone connection, you can click problem dialing in for an alternate phone number to dial. And now I'll hand it over to Dr. Ortega, President of the Council of Graduate Schools.
Good afternoon, colleagues. It's a real pleasure to be here with you on this webinar. International students, of course, as you know, play an incredibly important role in U.S. graduate education and research. CGS International Admissions Survey is an important part of the CGS services to members. It's been conducted since 2004 and tracks the applications and enrollments of international students seeking U.S. master's and doctoral degrees. It is the only report of its kind to offer data on the current academic year and to report on applications, admissions, and enrollments of international master's, certificates, and doctoral students at U.S. colleges and universities. I want to give a special shout out of thanks to the CGS member institutions and regional affiliates who participated on the fall 2019 data collection exercise. This year's report is also informed by focus group interviews conducted during fall 2019 with 8 universities regarding graduate students from Africa. It also summarizes results from a flash survey we conducted on visa and OPT delays earlier this year. So once again, many thanks to all of the institutions who provided us with insight. It's really gratifying to see that overall application and first-time enrollment numbers for international graduate students are on the rise after several consecutive years of decline. We know that our member universities work hard to ensure a welcoming environment for students and scholars from across the globe, and we take this year's results as evidence of their continued attractiveness. However, we do remain vigilant in monitoring obstacles, including the latest executive order, the travel ban, and other changes in immigration visa policy that may negatively impact our ability to attract talented students from around the world. So a special thanks to our members who've contributed data. A special thanks to our guest, Kim Needy, for joining us to share their campus strategies aimed at increasing international graduate enrollment. Kim, as many of you know, is the Dean of the Graduate School and of International Education at the University of Arkansas, and is also the president of the Conference of Southern Graduate Schools. I'd also like to thank IELTS for supporting the broadcast of this webinar presentation. Thank you to IELTS for their longstanding participation in the CGS Sustaining Membership Network, which allows companies to demonstrate their commitment to advancing graduate education. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank the very talented CGS staff who have made this webinar and the data underlying it possible. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Well, thank you, Suzanne. So, well, thank you everybody for calling in for today's webinar, the results from the fall 2019 CGS International Graduate Admissions Survey. So I'm going to turn to my colleagues to discuss some of the results. Again, as Suzanne mentioned, this year's report is informed not only by our International Graduate Admissions Survey, but also from a focus group we conducted during the fall and the flash survey that we conducted earlier this year. And many thanks to all those institutions participated in our data collection exercise. And there's a long list of people that we must thank for putting together this report, but particularly our research committee members for their feedback, including Dr. Needy. And also I'd like to thank NASA and also Chuck Umbler, the CGS Dean in Residence this year, for their insights and the contribution to the Sub-Saharan Africa focus group protocols. And also the Lauren, a colleague for the Public Policy and the Government Affairs Unit, and CGS's Advisory Committee on Advocacy and Public Policy for shaping our flash survey. And again, like I cannot thank enough for all the institutions who have contributed data to CGS International Graduate Admission Survey and the other survey we conducted. Again, the source of information for our strategic insight come from you, so your continued participation is very much appreciated. And if you, some of you might know, we are wrapping up the data collection cycle for CGS GRE Survey of Graduate Enrollment Degrees as we speak. If your institution have not submitted the data yet, you still have time. And if you have any questions about whether you submitted or not submitted, if you haven't submitted and you want to know how to do it, feel free to contact me after this webinar. The full report can be found at our CGS website. There you'll find our press release as well as a full report in PDF form. But this year, as a new feature, we created a downloadable figures and tables. So all the figures and the tables you see in the full report can now be downloaded as a separate file. So if you go to our website and click this downloadable figures and tables link, it'll direct you to this list of figures as well as tables. And you will be able to access both Excel version and also JPEG version of our figures and tables. So if you find our data points useful and want to incorporate it in your presentations, this will allow you to easily copy paste some of the information we provide in this report, and I hope you find this useful. From CGS's side, we're going to give some overviews of findings from our this year's survey, broken down by broader field of study and a selected region of and the country of origin. That Dr. Joe will cover this portion. And for the regional analysis on Sub-Saharan Africa, Dr. Medic will take from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Joe to go through some top line numbers in this year's report.
Thank you, Hiro. First, we will spend a few minutes providing you with information about notable trends in international graduate applications and first-time enrollment. After seeing declines in international graduate applications over 2 consecutive admission cycles, the U.S. institutions in the CGS International Graduate Admission Surveys reported increases in both international applications and first-time enrollment. In particular, for 2018 and for 2019, there was a 3% increase in international graduate applications and 4% increase in first-time international graduate enrollment. And these numbers are based on the institutions which contributed data to this survey for both years. While there are increases in both graduate applications and first-time enrollment, we are wondering how large those increases are and how increases vary by degree type. This figure shows the aggregated international graduate applications and first-time enrollment by degree type. As we can see from this figure, from 2016 to 2019, the doctoral application, which is the orange solid line, and the doctoral first-time enrollment, which is the dotted orange line, steadily increased over time. And on the other hand, we found that the applications and first-time enrollment for master's and certificate programs, which are the blue lines, are largely recovered to the 2017 level. However, they are still not recovered to the 2016 level. Then we take a closer look at the graduate number by institutional types. We found that the overall increase in applications appears to be driven largely by the 3% increase in master's and certificate programs. The increase in master's and certificate applications was particularly pronounced for R1 institutions and master's and other institutions. And moreover, the number of doctoral applications also increased by 3% during the same period of time at our institutions. In terms of first-time enrollment, both master's and doctoral first-time enrollment of international graduate students increased at R1 institutions as well. And also, there is a large increase of master's students at the master's and other institutions, with about 7%. However, first-time graduate enrollment for both master's and doctoral programs declined at the R2 and R3 institutions between 2018 and 2019. Then we'll transition to the highlights of field of study. In terms of field of study, international graduate applications and first-time enrollment increased in most of the fields between 2018 and 2019. In particular, international graduate applications increased 14% in biological and agriculture science. It increased 7% in health sciences and 7% in math and computer sciences. And in addition, the fields experiencing the biggest increase in international graduate first-time enrollment were mathematics and computer sciences with 11% increase, social and behavioral science 11%, and biological and agriculture science increased by 10%. However, we do saw some fields experience decline during the same period of time. We found that international graduate applications decreased by 3% in business and decreased by 2% in engineering. And moreover, we also saw first-time graduate enrollment decrease by 2% in business. Despite the decline in applications, engineering still had the second largest share of international graduate applications in fall 2019, which is about 24%, and followed by math and computer science, 26%. And in addition, business still had the third largest share of international graduate applications in fall 2019, which is 13%. As we can see, overall business, engineering, math, and computer science account for more than 60% of the total international graduate applications in fall 2019. And similarly, engineering, business, and math and computer sciences also had a large shares among first-time graduate students as well. Both engineering and math and computer sciences had a 23% share of international graduate first-time enrollment in fall 2019. And business had 17% of share in total of first-time enrollment, and most of its share is at the master's level. And engineering first-time enrollment had a large share at the doctoral level, while the math and computer sciences first-time enrollment had a larger share at the master's level. And overall, we found that engineering, math, and computer science and business continue to be the most popular fields of study at both master's and doctoral level in terms of the number of graduate applications and first-time enrollment. And now we'll transition to the highlights of the selected countries and regions. And over the past year, we saw that China and India continue to be the two largest countries of a region for international graduate students studying at U.S. institutions. And this has been the continued trend that we are seeing in terms of graduate applications. China and India remain the top senders of international graduate applications to the U.S. at both the master's and doctoral level. Both China and India alone has a larger share than the other Asian countries, the European countries, and the Middle East and in North Africa countries. And in terms of first-time international graduate enrollment in fall 2019, 1/3 of the first-time enrollment at the doctoral level were Chinese students, and followed by Indian students, 14%. At the master's level, the 71% of first-time international graduate enrollment was from China, and 28% was from India. And between fall 2018 and fall 2019, the number of graduate applications and first-time graduate enrollment of Chinese students each rose by 3%. Since fall 2014, first-time graduate enrollment of Chinese students at U.S. institutions remained stable every year. And for Indian students, there was no change in the number of graduate applications, while their first-time enrollment increased by 1%. And this is the second consecutive cycle that first-time graduate enrollment of Indian students remained steady, following by 2 consecutive cycles of substantial decline. And we also noticed that the number of students from Middle East and North Africa applying to the U.S. graduate schools declined during the same period. After 2 consecutive cycles of decline in the number of applications, we saw a modest increase in the number of applications from Iranian students. However, first-time graduate enrollment of Iranian students continues to decline. And despite this decline, the overall first-time enrollment of students from the Middle East and North African region was unchanged. And with the modest gain from Saudi Arabian students, this result indicates that the U.S. institutions in this study had a robust increase in students from other countries within this region to make up the difference. And on the contrary, Mexico and Sub-Saharan Africa show some notable increase in the total applications and first-time enrollment between fall 2018 and fall 2019. Similar to Iranian students, the number of graduate applications from Mexican students rose by 4% after 2 consecutive cycles of declines. However, unlike Iran, first-time graduate enrollment of Mexican students increased by 10%. And last but not least, graduate application and first-time enrollment of students from countries in the sub-Saharan Africa region continue to increase by 11% and 22% respectively. And this ends my part of the presentation. And I'll turn it over to.
I just wanted to insert the quick finding on the flash survey part of it. And well, so we received a very good number of responses from institutions. And again, we thank for all of you who completed a survey. And of those institutions, what we heard was that we had 123 institutions reported some type of increase the number of visa delays at the embassies or consulates overseas. So this is the visa process side of delays. And we also heard that 84 institutions reported increased number of delays or denials of international visitors at the ports of entry. So these are the people likely who already had visas to visit their institutions, but for one reason or another, they were delayed entry or denied. And it's a little bit difficult to systematically find, what prompted or what caused. But some of the comments that we received were the delays centered on the home country and the finances of, how they might be funded while they're studying in the United States. And also some of the denials that might be due to the former employment, social media posts, electronic device searches, or reasons not given. For this survey, as you might recall, if you filled it out, we asked broadly about international visitors, so not just on the prospective graduate students, but it's still we heard from this many institutions reported these instances. And again, this is a reason that, though we saw overall increases in the number, we remain vigilant about monitoring some of these visa policies and current issues around the international student. I'll turn it to Ray.
Thank you, Hiro. In addition to the 22% increase in first-time graduate enrollment from sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen robust increase from this region over the last several years. So we decided to explore the reasons why this has happened, where we've seen much slower growth and even some decline from other regions and overall in the same period of time. So these findings provide a little bit of context to the trends that we have seen. So to accomplish this, we conducted 8 focus groups with CGS member institutions. These were institutions chosen because they had strong international graduate student enrollment from the region. They were different institution types, so we had a few publics, privates, a couple of historically Black colleges and universities, as well as institutions that had a religious affiliation to get a little bit of diversity in terms of the institutions. And they were geographically located across the country, some in cities, some in rural, suburban settings, to get a good representative mix. We spoke with members of the graduate college, faculty, admissions, recruitment, international office personnel, as well as in some cases some students were invited, and getting these people in the same room to discuss questions related to the push and pull factors surrounding international graduate student enrollment from sub-Saharan Africa. And I'll share some of the opportunities, challenges, and kind of the next steps, as well as provide a few illustrative quotes that I think really distill the essence of what we were hearing from our participants. For the opportunities, we noticed that Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya are the biggest senders. They account for about 2/3 of the the enrollment from the region that consists of over 50 countries with wide variety both within the countries and the region themselves. But we did hear a lot of stories about organic connections from around the region, both within these 3 countries and across the region. And the thing that to keep in mind is that personal connections were key here. In many cases, this was faculty that had research projects. Some of these faculty, were diaspora members. Some of them were not. So there's wide variety there. Doing research, creating a pipeline for graduate students to come to the United States to pursue their education. We've also heard that alumni were a huge force in terms of word of mouth. The quote at the bottom really illustrates this, is that one institution spoke about having many touch points with embassies, and those embassies were full of their graduates that could really advocate for the institution and speak well about it from their own experiences and become unofficial ambassadors and recruiters for the institution. And one thing that was also exciting to hear was that there was interest in fields beyond the traditional development fields of agriculture, engineering, and public health. While those fields remain very strong and important and sources of attraction for students, we also heard a lot of stories about interest in fields such as business law, journalism, ethics, anthropology, history, and theology. So across the sciences, social sciences, humanities, to really meet the needs of these countries and their economies that are growing and need things like patent lawyers and things like that, that they would need to have advanced education and oftentimes come to the United States for that. At the same time, we noticed many challenges. With the demographic growth across the continent, we're seeing many new African institutions opening up across the continent at the undergraduate level. So this creates sometimes a little bit of a challenge in the admissions process. These institutions are a little less known to our institutions here in the U.S. The undergraduate curricula, as it pertains to preparedness, is a little less known, as well as the letter writers. So we spoke to several faculty members who serve on admissions committees, and they talked really about what the quote at the bottom illustrates here about really need to know the universities, their objectives, and really doing the legwork to understand the higher education system country to country. And sometimes this would also include relying on disciplinary organizations, as our disciplines are very global in nature, to understand, who these students are and where they're coming from, and to be able to properly judge them for their admissions here in the U.S. At the same time, we're not the only ones trying to recruit students from this region. China, for example, has pumped a lot of scholarship money to attract students from the region. The UK and really a lot of former colonial countries that have linguistic and perhaps educational system ties, may have a more attractive alignment. So countries such as the UK have been very heavily involved in the recruitment of students that provide competition. And even South Africa, a regional powerhouse that might not be as far from home for some students, has really been a big player in recruiting students from around the region. And of course, as Hiro mentioned earlier, immigration has been a major concern, both on the intake, the visa delays, denials, et cetera, but also issues such as OPT and eventually moving on to obtaining the H-1B visa due to caps has been something very difficult for students. And of course, the age-old problem of finances, but we saw some more nuance there. It wasn't just tuition and fees, but also more smaller practical issues, such as needing a credit card to be able to pay the application fee and finding workarounds for that, as well as currency fluctuations really affecting students. This both comes into play, again, for just paying the tuition and fees, but also tying again into immigration, where the ability to pay is something that's very scrutinized at embassies across the world. And lastly, part of our conversation talked about the need to shift the conversation, not just from the recruitment, but towards retaining and graduating these students, particularly in a time, where there's been racial tension on campuses and across the country and tightening immigration regulations. We had respondents talk about issues of race and having to have these discussions on campus, both at the administrative and then student levels, to put at ease students. Also, there was a discussion about, perhaps some of the frustration of incidents that happen off campus and how to address them. And the resounding answer was that silence is not the right approach, is that institutions must be proactive in order to address these concerns. Because again, the experience that these students have then feeds right back into the admissions processes. These are our ambassadors, on the continent where it's sometimes more difficult to have boots on the ground in terms of recruitment officers, is that making sure that students graduate, have an excellent experience, both academically and personally, and then be able to recruit for us on the ground. So, I will now turn it over to Hiro.
Oh, great. Thank you, Anu, and sharing the insights from our report. Now, we're going to ask Dr. Needy to weigh on our report, as well as the things she's seeing at her university.
Thank you, Hiro. And if you could go ahead and advance the slide, please. So I thought I would begin with an overview of the University of Arkansas for those of you who aren't familiar with us. So we are a land-grant institution that was founded in 1871. So next year we will be marking our 150th anniversary. We are an R1 institution classified by the Carnegie Foundation with highest level of research activity. We were a flagship institution in our state with our enrollment approaching 28,000 students. Research expenditures in 2018 were $175 million. And we are the founding institution for the Fulbright U.S. student program. So J. William Fulbright was a senator in our state and was the president of our institution. And that's something that we're very, very proud of. Okay, you can advance to the next slide. We're a little bit unique here compared to how other institutions are organized. So back in 2010, the graduate school was combined with international education. And so we have 2 associate deans then that support each of those units, grad school and international education. The international education piece includes really the following elements. So first of all, international recruitment and admissions, sponsored student programs, our international students and scholars unit, study abroad and international exchange. We have a private partner that provides English language and cultural training, and we have an academic center in Rome. I want to point out that we have responsibility for international education at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. And so I'll share some more data with you at a total, but then we'll focus then on the graduate portion of that. Another unique element, and this will become more apparent later, is that within the graduate school, we also oversee 6 graduate interdisciplinary programs. And by interdisciplinary graduate programs, we mean a program where we have 2 or more colleges that are participating in that program. And again, I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So on this slide, again, to give you a highlight, we have approximately 4,170 graduate students who are enrolled here. International students make up 18% of that, and 115 different countries are represented. So essentially every single continent. We have 130 graduate programs, 60 Fulbright scholars that are on campus and enrolled, over 1,600 graduate assistantships, 320 doctoral fellows, 55 Masters of Fine Arts fellows. And our graduate students, there are 21% that are underrepresented. Okay, so you can go to the next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to share today really enrollment data as opposed to admissions data. And part of that has to do with the fact that we've recently been in the process of moving to a new CRM with Slate. We've had some shutdowns and toolings of our MBA program. And so I want to focus on really enrollment data as opposed to admissions because it's, I think, more indicative of what we're seeing. So in a nutshell, our results from the University of Arkansas really align very similarly with the survey results that were just shared with you. And we too have been experienced a decline in really our total international enrollment over the past 4 years or so. So this graph is showing the blue bar represents total international student enrollment, which is comprised of the orange bar, which is the undergrad enrollment, and the gray bar, which is graduate enrollment. But what you can see if you look at the chart carefully is that since about 2014 or so, the undergraduate enrollment has been declining modestly but steadily. But actually, the graduate enrollment has been holding fairly steady. And in fact, in 2019, we had one of our higher graduate student enrollments. So that bar there represents 745 students. I'll discuss this a little bit more, but our sponsored students have declined a bit, and that's at the grad and undergrad level, especially those coming from Iraq and from Saudi Arabia. Okay, if you could page forward to the next slide. This breaks down enrollment by college. Okay, so let me point out, I think, some of the more interesting things. So not surprising, engineering has a large percentage of international graduate students. So this represents 28% of their graduate student body are international students. Agricultural, food, and life sciences, that's the bar on the bottom of the chart, also has a large percentage at 25%. The architecture and design bar towards the middle is showing 25%, but they've just started a graduate program. There's only 4 students, so that's 1 out of 4 students, so it's really not that significant. But interestingly, the graduate school is showing the largest percentage of international graduate students at 44%. And we'll look into this further on the next slide, if you can page forward. So what do we mean by the graduate school? Again, these are these interdisciplinary graduate programs. And so one of our successful strategies on our campus has been to intentionally work to grow interdisciplinary graduate programs. These are programs that are a combination of different units, different departments, and are unique and attract a set of students that might not otherwise come here. So there are 6 different programs. We have over 267 students that are currently enrolled in these interdisciplinary programs this year, with over 500 program alum. These 6 programs are comprised of over 35 different disciplines. And I want to highlight 2 specific programs. The first is cell and molecular biology, which has 65% of their students in international enrollment rate, and the microelectronics and photonics program, which has 54% of their students for their international enrollment rate. So these programs not only attract high quality graduate students, but also appeal very strongly to international students. Okay, so if we could page forward to the next slide. So a second strategy to attract more international graduate students is really recruiting across the globe. So again, this is pretty intentional. Of our 1,408 international students who are enrolled at the undergrad and graduate levels, we have representation from 115 different countries. And so we are protecting ourselves in one sense from not relying solely on one part of the world where some kind of economic downturn or some kind of environmental or political downturn could really impact our numbers. At the graduate level, the top countries by graduate enrollment include China and India, similar to the survey results that we just saw, but also Iran, Bangladesh, and Saudi Arabia. If we look at where our undergraduate students are coming from, and I'll talk more about this in a later slide, but Panama and Bolivia would replace Iran and Bangladesh as a large number of students that are coming from Panama and Bolivia. And we'll talk about that a little bit more because these are specific programs that we have. So more specifically at the graduate level, we are seeing increased interest from students in Southeast Asia, namely from countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Cambodia. For us, Latin America remains a steady stream of students as well as the Caribbean. Iran has been our largest increase in both admissions and enrollment in the last 3 years. And you can see again that it's our number 3 country as far as graduate enrollment on our campus. Let me talk about Africa because we just heard about that. So for us, Africa has been a little bit tricky. And we're seeing consistent growth in Nigeria and Kenya, but not as much growth from other African countries. They remain pretty kind of steady. One thing that's kind of fun, I'll point out, each year our International Education Unit hosts a cultural immersion type program where we focus on a specific country. And earlier this month, we focused on Nigeria, and we held a day-long cultural immersion program that was really put on by Nigerian students as well as their friends, as well as support from our unit to celebrate the students from that nation, to provide awareness about the nation. So the day included learning some language, learning some words, singing some songs, and partaking in various different activities and tasting food that might be from that country. And we had a bazaar also as well, where we could, with pretend money, purchase different things. This was so much fun, and it was very, very successful. In fact, through social media, there were numerous posts that were made that circled around the globe, went back to Nigeria, and literally that next few days, we were receiving inquiries from prospective students in Nigeria that wanted more information about our program at the university. Okay, if you can go to the next slide. So a third strategy that we'll focus on is engaging our alumni. And you heard a little bit about the importance of that also just earlier with Sub-Saharan Africa. This is something, again, that's been pretty intentional with us for the past few years. And so, as you know, happy alumni are one of the most powerful recruiting tools. And so we're really remaining deliberate about recruiting these types of students. So we've had a recent trip to Bolivia, where we visited 3 different cities. This picture in the upper right-hand corner is from our alum in Santa Cruz, which is on the eastern portion of Bolivia. We went to Cochabamba and to the nation's capital of La Paz. And in Southeast Asia, the picture in the bottom right-hand corner is from Singapore. We visited, in addition to Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we have a group that is just landed in Vietnam. We mentioned that we have a center in Rome that provides education. The bottom couple of pictures are from that. We celebrated last April our 30th year in Rome with a big event and brought in alumni, former students, faculty, etc. So on these visits, we're very intentional about visiting with alumni, and in addition to that, alumni, partner institutions, educational partners, etc. We also bring every year onto campus government and non-government organizations such as like Education USA advisors and overseas universities. Another thing, if you see here, I say domestic, Dallas, DC area, Bay Area, Los Angeles. So like you, we have a lot of our international alumni that do not return back to their native country, but stay right here in the US. And for us, they tend to congregate in large metropolitan areas where there's lots of employment, there's lots of diversity, and they fit in really well. So we've also been doing alumni events and doing a lot of visits with our international alums. They're successful, they have great jobs, they're very proud of their time at the University of Arkansas, and they want to help us. So they want to help us by recruiting and moving more students to us, but also from a fundraising standpoint. This has been also a really great opportunity. So in addition to some of these things, I'll just say a couple of other related strategies. One is really about partnering with some of the other colleges. We've done this thus far in engineering and in our College of Education and Health Professions to do a hire 50-50 of a recruiter that we eventually turn over to them full time, because as you know, the graduate school can only recruit graduate students to a certain extent. We need the partnership of the colleges. We need the partnerships specifically of faculty. Another strategy that is kind of related is with the international students. Many of them are already here in the United States at community colleges, at undergraduate schools, and they want to stay on to get a graduate degree. So we are also making sure that we are reaching out to these students who are already in the US, but may not be on our campus. 3 years ago, this is starting our third year, we set up a fund that's called the Graduate Recruitment Assistance Fund. We had faculty say, hey, I'm traveling globally. I would like to help recruit some students. Can you help us? We never had a budget for that. So 3 years ago, we set up a budget, and faculty can tap into that budget, and we can support their trip. We can help them add a day or two onto their trip so that they can do more visits. We provide part of the funding, but not all of the funding. Typically, we fund up to about 50% of the funding. We want them to have some money in the game. We make them go through a quick training session on best practices in graduate and international recruitment. And this has also been very successful and very popular. Okay, if you can go to my last slide. So the final strategy I'll talk about today is really about strengthening partnerships. So I mentioned about sponsored student programs. These have been critical, although we have had some declines in the past year. So we are kind of upping our game to make sure that we're getting out there and setting up more meetings with our sponsoring organizations. So the biggest decline that we've personally seen is in Saudi Arabia and Iraq. So the next two bullets, the Panamanian collaboration and Partners of America or Bolivia, we have had over 3 generations now of students from some of these countries, so in Bolivia in particular. So we have students whose parents and or grandparents studied here. And again, this creates a very positive pipeline because they have a good relationship and we go and visit them. We just finished up International Education Week on our campus, where we had dozens of different activities that were aimed to make sure that students felt welcomed, felt engaged, and we always have a theme. So for example, 2 years ago or last year, our theme was "You Are Welcome Here." And we created a video around "You Are Welcome Here" to reach out to students to make them feel welcome. We had another theme this year, and it was unity in diversity. So these are important messages and taglines that help to recruit but retain and then help us market students in the future. Another couple programs are iFriend and Campus Cousins programs, where students get to meet other members of the campus with Campus Cousin and other members of the community. So a recent statistic that's a little alarming is that international students at the 75% level report that they've never visited an American home. And another 40% of international students say that they have no close American friends. This is going just very counterproductive to all of our efforts. So programs like iFriends and Campus Cousins can help to address those. Spring International Language Center is the private partnership that I mentioned to you earlier. So our students can come onto campus. They don't have to be English ready. We can get them English ready. So an example of the Panamanian program, where we get a lot of actually undergraduate students, they come for 5 years. Year one, they spend in Spring International Language Center learning English, learning the culture. This program has also helped us to secure funding with other private partnerships where they want to send students here for study and sponsor them. And then the last thing I'll just mention is our testing services unit that reports to the graduate school, where they offer numerous different types of standardized testing, but those also include like TOEFL and English placement testing. This has also been very helpful because students can come here for those testing. So I'll stop right there, and I know there's a plan to turn things over for Q&A.
Thank you so much. We're running a little bit over time, so a reminder that the webinar recording and slides will be emailed to participants and posted on the CGS website. If you have any questions, you can put them into the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I think we only have time for one question, and I'll hand it over to Hiro.
Well, so thanks, Kim, for a lot of insights. So like that's one question. So obviously in your office is situated a little bit differently because you're both the graduate dean and also overseeing the international education unit. So with that in mind, what would be, I guess, the tips for your graduate dean colleagues who are not overseeing the international education unit to be as proactive and as engaging as you are in this area?
Okay, so I would just say, here's an example. When I first came into our unit, we had an office for domestic graduate recruitment and an office for international graduate recruitment. And when we did a kind of workflow and process mapping of those two units, we really discovered that they had more in common than they had different. International graduate recruitment, in essence, had a few more steps, right? A few more bits of paperwork to fill out, et cetera, that they were more aligned than different. So because they were both in our unit, we could merge those together. So I guess what the tip would be is that I think in order to be successful, grad school deans need to work closely with their international education offices, with their senior international officer, to figure out how they can work in partnership, because both units are going to be resource constrained. And so how can they work in a complementary factor, because there are similar goals. So in an international office, they have a goal to, let's say, bring more international students onto campus. Well, guess what? Many of those are graduate students, so that aligns just in a positive, direct way with the graduate school. Working with the international offices to say what type of programs are international students interested in? Which programs do they want to study? And so as we're developing new graduate programs, whether it's at the doctoral, master's, certificate, credentialing is another kind of piece. Again, working collaboratively together instead of in cross purposes.
Well, thanks so much. I note that there's some more questions coming in. Even if you've submitted a question and we're not able to get to it, we'll try to link your question with the appropriate answerer. And thanks to Kim so much for her incredible presentation, and thank you to my CGS colleagues here for their great work. And also, if you have any questions about the CGS International Graduate Admissions Survey and other CGS research projects, you have Hiro's information down there below. Finally, we'd really like to thank IELTS. IELTS measures the language proficiency of people who want to study or work where English is used as a language of communication. It is the world's most popular English proficiency test for study, work, and migration purposes. IELTS offers many free services for universities, including on-campus professional development workshops, social media promotion of U.S. universities to IELTS test takers, webinars pertaining to international enrollment, and IELTS results verification service. Please note that a handout regarding the April 21st IELTS Professional Development for Graduate Enrollment Managers Workshop is available in your GoToWebinar control panel. Please feel free to share this workshop information with members of your campus that may be interested in participating in this free workshop. If you have any questions regarding access to these complimentary services or registering for the workshop, please email IELTS at stakeholder@IELTSUSA.org. That's stakeholder@IELTSUSA.org. We'd also like to thank the audience, and particularly the question askers, for their participation. We also want to let you know there's 2 upcoming CGS webinars, Trends in Graduate Education, which will be happening Wednesday, February 26th from 2 to 3 p.m. And then Culturally Aware Mentoring, Optimizing Mentoring Relationships, Wednesday, March 18th, 2020. As always, you can find information about the CGS webinars at the URL below. Thank you so much, and we look forward to the next webinar. Thank you.